Welcome to Hearthside Lore. The Lizardmen. Introduction. The Lizardmen are an ancient race created by the godlike beings known as the Old Ones to be the guardians of the Warhammer world. Their age-old civilization is based deep within the steaming jungles of Lustria and the Southlands, where their mighty temple cities rise amid the ancient trees and cloying swamps. The bloated Slan mage priests are masters of magic and the original servants of the Old Ones, and it is they who oversee the entire Lizardman civilization, guiding it forwards. At the heart of the Lizardmen armies are the powerful Saurus, hulking reptilian warriors spawned solely for the purpose of war. They are revered as sacred warriors of the gods, and each temple city has an army of them dwelling beneath the temples, ever ready to march against their foes. In ages past, the Old Ones departed the world in an event of catastrophic consequence, known as the Fall, that dramatically altered the world and stranded their servants alone there. Without the guidance of their creator gods, the Slan worked to interpret the great plan that their masters were working towards and attempt to continue the cause, restoring the order that was present before the coming of chaos. With cold, alien indifference, the Slan guide their armies toward the fulfillment of this plan and mercilessly punish any who stand in the way of their sacred mission. Children of the gods. The creators of the Lizardmen Society were a mysterious interstellar race known as the Old Ones. These aloof and mysterious beings wielded unfathomable power and intellect. They were able to twist the fabric of space and time to their will, and could summon vast energies that they manipulated in the form of devastating magical spells and powers. Born within mighty ships that could travel unimaginable distances in a heartbeat, they journeyed to the world, bringing with them their servants and slave races. Of these creatures, the most favored were the Slan. Blessed with considerable abilities of mind, the Slan were gifted creators, able to manipulate matter, time, and space with the aid of their masters. From the designs of the Old Ones, it was the Slan who built the immense constructions that hung like moons above the northern and southern poles. Gateways that enabled instantaneous travel through rifts in space. Doorways to uncountable realities. In ages long past, the world was a primordial land inhabited by crude early life forms. It was a place of harsh extremes. Ice covered much of the land, and endless blizzards and storms raged across the skies, while in other areas volcanoes spewed hot lava and poisonous ash into the atmosphere. Pockets of hot and humid jungles teemed with life, and it was here that the first civilization, the Lizardmen, grew. This is the oldest of the sophisticated races, and their cities deep within the steaming jungles were thriving centers of activity long before the first ancestors of elves and dwarves had been born into the world. Under the Old One's influence, the world was irrevocably changed. The planet was moved closer to the sun, its orbit altered, and its axis shifted to make the climate warmer and more habitable. Plants and life forms of infinite variety were introduced. The single mega-continent was split apart under the Old One's will, and the shifting plates came to rest in a manner more compliant with their design. In the lands that later became known as Lustria, the Old Ones made their city capital. The oppressive topography and climate of this land suited the alien metabolism of the Old Ones and their servants, and a series of cities were built in the areas surrounding the capital. Other cities were built across the world, in what is now known as the Southlands and Cathay, for in that time all the continents were more humid and wet, and jungles spread across much of the world. Communication and travel between these different realms was instantaneous and easy for the Old Ones. Even their favored servants, the Slan, were capable of this cross-continent communication and travel, though not with the casual ease of their god-like masters. The Old Ones altered the makeup of the crude life forms that dwelt within Lustria and the other realms, remolding them into beings that fitted their desires and needs. It was in this hazy time that the first of the Saurus were created, a new life form, designed and spawned to act as warriors, to march forth and pacify the lands, as well as acting as the guardians of the temple cities and their Slan. Entire species were exterminated by the Saurus. After the Saurus, the first spawning of the skinks were created. The Old Ones had need of dexterous, quick-witted servants to ensure the smooth running of day-to-day life, as well as to nurture and tend to the races which the Old Ones had chosen to flourish. For untold millennia, the Lizardmen were the undisputed rulers of the world. Their technology was masterful, as was their skill at manipulating the forces of magic, though to the Old Ones magic and technology were one and the same. The 5 spawnings of the mage priests. There were 5 spawnings of Slan created by the Old Ones after they arrived on the world, and more have been spawned since their departure. The Slan of the first generation spawning were the builders of the first temple cities. They were the most powerful of the mage priests, and the only beings permitted to enter the presence of the Old Ones, perhaps because no other living creature had the mental or psychic strength to cope with the experience. They died many thousands of years ago, and their bodies were embalmed to be kept within the sacred temples as venerated relics. Of the second generation spawning, originally spawned to alter the world's alignment and orbit, there are only 5 remaining. These surviving mage priests are immensely old, perhaps the oldest creatures in existence, and they rule the greatest of the temple cities. Younger by several thousand years are the Slan of the third generation, who aided in the construction of the lesser temple cities, where they rule to this day. Their numbers are few, with possibly less than 20 remaining in existence. The mage priests of the 4th generation are more numerous, and were spawned to attend to the warp gates about the poles, and to aid in the creation of the World Pond, the great separation of the continents. In haste, the 5th generation was spawned, mere centuries before the great catastrophe. Youngest and most numerous of the Slan, though still old enough to remember a time before elves or dwarves, the 5th generation mage priests are the most active and aggressive of the Slan. The Fall. The Old Ones continued to direct the advancement and evolution of their chosen fledgling races for countless turnings of the moons, for time had little meaning to them, and they watched as the world was altered to their desires. They taught the ancestors of the modern races how to manipulate the essence of magical energy, and gently edged them towards civilization and learning. However, a nightmarish time of terror was soon to come, an occurrence that would doom the world to certain and eventual destruction. An enemy appeared, an adversary of pure energy. It was the source of the Old One's magical power, yet uncontrollable and utterly destructive. What was known in later days as chaos, A mighty battle raged for many centuries as the Creator Old Ones struggled against chaos for control of the interdimensional gateways in the skies above the world. The energies unleashed during this time racked the lands, but slowly the Old Ones began to gain the upper hand in this titanic struggle. Attempts were made to close the gateways, for they were the doorways through which chaos could enter the world. Yet this task proved impossible. In a catastrophic explosion of absolute darkness, the gates above the poles collapsed in on themselves and were utterly destroyed. It is unknown whether the Old Ones demolished the gates themselves, or if they were torn apart by the immense pressure of energies exerted during the struggle against chaos. Whatever the case, parts of these gates were thrown all over the world, falling as fiery comets that blasted the earth, causing plates to shift, earthquakes to rack the lands, and the seas to boil. Huge amounts of raw, chaotic material coalesced into matter in the form of a new and malignant moon. Chaos energy spewed across the lands in an explosive surge, destroying many of the Lizardmen's cities instantly. The fabric of reality was ripped apart in a terrible series of tears that could be felt in the soul of every living being the world over. The largest of these gaping wounds lay in the extreme north and south, and what emerged through these rents would eventually doom the world. From these realms of chaos came all manner of demons, nightmares given form, devouring all in their path. Raw magical energy flowed through these fallen gates, washing over the world in immense and ever-increasing tides. The Saurus armies of the Lizardmen battled against the demons in apocalyptic wars in which countless millions were slain. The destruction of the warp gates marked the departure of the Old Ones. No one truly knows what happened to these supreme beings, even amongst the Slann. Some believed that they were instantly destroyed by the influx of chaotic energy, the ultimate antithesis of the highly ordered Old Ones. Others speculated that the Old Ones, divine as they were dangerously vulnerable and susceptible to the attentions of the demons, and say that they were possessed and torn asunder. Others believed that they realized that the world was doomed, and so abandoned it to its fate. Whatever the case, the Old Ones left the world, leaving their favored servants, the Slann, stranded, cut off from their people across the stars, and facing imminent destruction from the rampant forces and energies of chaos. The lost children of the fallen gods. Still reeling from the shock wave that the destruction of the polar gates caused, and the horror of the loss of their divine masters, the Slann were forced into immediate action, their magic, weak in comparison to the powers of the Old Ones, yet still far in advance of what any other species had mastered, or ever would, became increasingly difficult to control. The unpredictable waves of chaos energy pulsing around the world caused havoc with the Slann's spellcasting, and some of them were overcome by the excess of power. Those that survived frantically began to set up a series of protective barriers in an attempt to hold back the raw chaos energy surging around the world. The Slann knew that if left unchecked, the unpredictable winds of chaos would return and eventually destroy the world. All life stolen by the demonic entities and the planet itself ripped asunder. They frantically attempted to reawaken the shattered series of wards that were scattered across the world in areas of power, usually where the lines of energy that crisscrossed the world met. Further strong points to hold back chaos were restored in scattered pockets all over the world, including within Lustria itself, deep in the jungles of the Southlands and along the islands circling the southern pole. And so it is that the Slann took on themselves the role of protectors of this world that was carved by the will of the Old Ones. As their numbers dwindled, the Slann retreated further into the depths of their jungle homelands, struggling to hold their own temple cities from the onslaught of chaos. Attempting to maintain control over their own domain, the Slann were forced to leave the rest of the world to its own devices, while they struggled for survival, and ultimate doom seemed certain. This doom was averted by the selfless actions of the elves of Ulthuan. Under siege from the demons overrunning their island, the elves created a powerful vortex of energy that sucked away most of the magical winds in a devastating maelstrom. The demons required this energy to maintain their physical presence, and so were banished. The elves had learned their magical art from the Old Ones and the Slann over many generations, and they were remarkably adept at manipulating the magic winds that now blew. Indeed, they could control the magic in ways the Slann could, or would not. The hugely powerful spell that the elves cast was extremely costly, unselfishly dooming their most powerful mages to an eternity of torment for the benefit of the entire world. Without the magic surging across the landscape, the demons were unable to remain in existence, and began to disappear, their physical forms merging back into the stronger collections of chaos energy in the extreme north and south. The Slann mage priests have attempted to follow what they see as the great plan that the Old Ones were working towards, yet this plan has become blurred by time. Struggling to regain their lost power and preeminence, the Slann existed in isolation for thousands of years. The fledgling races which were nurtured by the Old Ones now dabble with forces far beyond their comprehension and engage in dangerous practices that were never intended. The world of the Old Ones was one of order and stability, and it is this regulation that the Slann long for. They look at the world with cold, unreadable eyes, seeing the disorder that thrives throughout the land. Still, they work to restore the imbalance of chaos, hoping for the day when the Old Ones return from across the stars for their lost children. The defense of Itza. As the temple cities began to fall to the demonic hordes, increasing pressure was put on those still standing. With the grid of power collapsing between the cities, the armies of chaos attacked the temple city of Itza under the protection of Lord Croak. This, the first city, was of utmost importance, for if it fell, then a vital link would be broken. With the existence of the Lizardmen on the verge of total destruction, Lord Croak mustered his defenses. Lord Croak, first of all the Slann spawned on the world, erected a total and enclosing field of power around the city, and the demons battered against it for days on end, expiring even as they clawed at the crackling magical barrier dome. Eventually the mage priest could hold the mystic wall no more, and with a final surge of power, he made the barrier explode outwards, leveling the jungle for miles all around, and banishing thousands of the demons from the old world. Nevertheless, there were still countless more, and the screaming masses of chaos engulfed the city, and lizardmen battled demons in the streets of the first city. In this titanic battle, the Kroxagor Nakai, known as the Wanderer, rose to preeminence. His own temple city in ruins, he journeyed to Itza to aid its defense. He killed 80 of the foul demons, holding the vital bridge of the stars on his own until reinforcements arrived, earning him great honor. He was thought slain until his reappearance nearly 3,000 years later. Serenely seated atop the Great Pyramid of Itzel, an isolated island of calm amidst the hellish storm, Croak directed his energies to assaulting the demons directly. He caused fire to rain from the heavens, engulfing the foe, and forced the redirection of the river Amaxon to sweep away thousands more. For months, Lord Croak held the demons at bay, slaughtering countless numbers with arcing beams of power. He caused earthquakes to tear open gaping chasms that engulfed entire demonic legions before closing them once more. Eventually, Croak fell, ripped apart by a war host of a dozen greater demons that had fought their way to the top of the pyramid. Even so, Lord Croak's undying spirit fought on. Such was his determination and dedication to his temple city that he refused to let death hinder him, and eventually denied victory to the enemy. Thus the first city was saved, but at tragic cost. Timeline of Lustria. The dawn of creation. -15,000. The Old Ones arrive in the primeval and untouched lands of Lustria. The slan of the first spawning are created at the will of the Old Ones. The first Saurus are spawned as living weapons, created from a blend of now extinct native creatures. The first generations of skinks and Kroxigor are created. -10,000. Founding of the first city, Itza, soon followed by the founding of Clanohupek and Tlax. The second generation of Slan are spawned. The orbit of the world is altered to affect weather patterns and temperature, making it more conducive to life. During this time, the Old Ones begin to enforce their domination over the inhabitants of the world, radically altering the future of these races. Slan of the third spawning are brought forth. They accomplish the founding of Tlaxtlan, Quetzal, and Zlatlan. Slan of the fourth spawning are created to attend the Polar Warp Gate. They also found the remaining temple cities, creating a grid of power across the lands, neutral lines of energy linking the cities. The supercontinent is split into separate smaller lands. The world pond is created, and the Southlands moved across the globe, separating the temple cities. Such physical distances meant little, for travel and communication between the cities is instantaneous. The Old Ones send their armies of Saurus forth to lay down order. The annihilation of many undesirable races is accomplished. Ongoing experiments are conducted by the Old Ones as they create and destroy a number of new races, altering them from native life forms. The elves, dwarves, and men are born. The Old Ones ensure that their creations are secured a strong foundation in the lands chosen for them to continue the slow process of evolution and the growth of civilization with only minimal interaction with each other. The race of greenskins appears towards the end of the Age of Creation. There are continuing wars to try to eliminate this parasitic race from existence, though ultimately this plague seems to be impossible to eradicate. The Fall, -5,600 to -4,500. Collapse of the polar warp gates. This causes a rent in the reality to be ripped open, allowing chaos to enter the world. This marks the departure of the Old Ones. Demonic hordes appear and run rampant across the world, creating imbalance and horror. The temple city of Hutek is the first to fall under the demonic onslaught, its mage priests slain and spawning pools tainted. The Lizardmen muster the greatest armies ever witnessed in the world to repel the demonic invaders. Countless millions are slain in these titanic battles. Throughout the world, the races formed by the Old Ones fight against the rampantly spreading demons, yet they are fighting a losing battle. The entire populations of Huatl, Tlangsla, Chakwa, and Kotl are also slain by the demons, each temple city weakening as more cities fall, breaking their grid of connected power. Mage priest Adohi Tenga of Tlaxtlan repels the demons besieging his temple city after weeks of battle, and lends his power to protecting the remaining cities and ensuring that the grid of power does not collapse utterly. Lord Mazdamundi manages to hold the protective barrier around Hexawatl, but in doing so cannot aid his brethren of Pahuax, who are slain by a host of greater demons. With the power of the Old Ones lost from the world, contact is lost with the Lizardmen of the Southlands. One of the oldest mage priests, Chakota of Zlatlan, having been taught by the lost Old Ones Olanka, manages to use his powers to destroy the demonic legions within the Southlands in one catastrophic spell, sacrificing himself in the process. The elves of Ulthuan are almost exterminated by demons overrunning their isle. Their mages begin a dangerous and desperate spell to push the demons back. The Slann add their power to those of the elves, and together they draw the demons to the north and south poles. Defenses are put into place to hold the forces of chaos at bay. The immediate threat of chaos has been repelled, yet throughout the years, as their powers wax, they will overrun these defenses in mighty incursions. The temple city of Chupayotl starts to slip into the oceans of the world pond. The Age of Recovery, -4419. First High Elf explorers penetrate the Lustrian jungle, journeying northwards from the citadel of Dusk. -3894. The temple city of Chupayotl slips into the sea, and all its inhabitants journey to other temple cities. Rumors in later years speak of an undersea race of beings taking up residence within this city of gold, hidden deep beneath the waves. -2000. Ancient records of Zlatlan refer to strife with lost dwarf stronghold of Karak Zorn. -1500. Slan mage priests make a minor shift in continents, which was interpreted as the intention of the Old Ones before they departed. The World's Edge Mountains are riven by earthquakes, dwarf strongholds are destroyed, and the dwarf empire falls into decline. The Age of Strife, -1399. Skaven clan Pestilens occupies the ruined lizardmen city of Quetzal. Plagues spread throughout Lustria. Many cities are abandoned. Incessant war between lizardmen and Skaven continues for centuries. -215. The first Dark Elf raiders penetrate Lustrian jungles to steal sacred artifacts. 0. The prophecy of Sotek is brought to light in Chakwa. A double-tailed comet, symbol of Sotek's forked tongue, appears, heralding the migration of the red-crested skinks and the rise of the cult of Sotek. The cult spreads throughout Lustria. 100. Skaven clan Pestilens abandoned Quetzal and migrate back to the old world through the Southlands. Skaven are forced to migrate because thousands of serpents are sent by Sotek into their tunnels. Henceforth, Sotek is recognized by the Slan mage priests as the preeminent lizardmen god. 315. Lord Tepik Inzi leads an army to Nagaroth. The Dark Elves are defeated and the star, Stella of Quetli, is recovered. 876. The vampire Luther Harkon is washed up on Lustrian shores. He creates the undead realm known as the Vampire Coast. where the bodies of dead sailors killed in the treacherous waters off the coast rise from the cold depths and haunt the land. High elf naval captains report of ghostly ships in the fog, and a siren wail that lures sailors to their doom. 888, Norse adventurer Lost Ericsson lands in Lustria and founds the colony of Skeggi. Norse raids into Lustria begin. 930, Lord Kultep of Itza, aided by ancient Kroxikor Nakai, halts Luther's attempts to penetrate the Lustrian interior with a shambling horde of drowned pirates and sailors. 1150. Ibn Jalaba of Arabi treks across the desert, searching for an overland route into the interior of the Southlands, encounters the hidden lizardmen city of Zlatlan. 1492. Marco Colombo, Chilean merchant prince and explorer, voyages to Lustria. He witnesses the defeat of a dark elf raid on Tlaxcalan. 1493. A dark elf raiding force attempting to sack Tlax is defeated by mage priest Xlatuk. 1690. Cathayan Yin Tuan makes an epic journey across Lustria and the Southlands. He narrowly escapes sacrifice in Zlatlan. 1801. The ousted pirate prince of Sartosa, Luciano Soprania, founds Port Reaver. Despite numerous lizardmen attacks, it manages to turn into a flourishing trading port, though it is notorious as a den of cutthroats and raiders, as well as a haven for adventurers and treasure seekers. 1847. Amidst rumors of illegitimacy, Duke Toodle du Longueuil finances an expedition led by his son into the jungles of Lustria. They land in Port Reaver and spend several months in preparations. Nearly 6 months after entering the jungles, the lizardmen temple city of Huatl is robbed of its sacred artifacts. The young Bretonnian noble and his entourage are never heard from again. Their presence is not missed. 1944. El Cadavo, adventurer and sometime pirate, founds the port of Cadavo on his third attempt to penetrate the jungles. The town is destroyed under the order of Slan mage priest Mazdamundi 3 times, each time being rebuilt. A devastating earthquake ensures that the town is finally abandoned. It is rumored that El Cadavo, having escaped by ship with Lustrian treasures, is lost at sea due to unseasonably deadly weather conditions. 2064. A group of gamblers found Swamp Town, fleeing their debts in Port Reaver. This grows from a ramshackle shanty town into the busiest trade destination in Lustria. 2187. Lord Melkin returns to the imperial court after spending a year exploring Lustria. He is accompanied by a copper-skinned, hairless being, barely 3 feet tall. Melchin claimed he came from the Waiaharui tribe, a race of diminutive people found in the jungles. Reportedly, the creature eats a high-ranking court official and flees. Rumors abound of his hiding out in the moot. 2315. The pirate king Draven is employed to protect merchant ships arriving and leaving Swamp Town from the pirates based in Port Reaver. He uses his power to destroy the fleets of his competitors and then sacks Swamp Town himself. The Age of Recompense. 2520. The threat to Albion. Gates are opened to the island. Scar leader Krokgar leads the first war parties to cleanse the Isle of Warm Bloods. Under the manipulations of Lord Mazdamundi, the climate of the isle is altered, and the start of a new jungle is formed. Work begins on the founding of the new temple city Quangkata, place of resistance, in the interior of Albion. 2521. The sacred mists of Albion are restored. 2522. The growing power of chaos is evidenced by increasing raids on Lustria by seafaring marauder tribes. Dark elves are seen guiding chaos attacks. Mazdamundi and Krokgar are forced to return to Hexawatl from Konquata to crush a particularly vicious attack led by Vashnar, the Tormentor. The jungle continent of Lustria is the most hostile environment outside of the realms of chaos. This verdant landmass is covered with a primordial jungle so thick that its canopy seems to replace the sky itself. Trees older than the race of man all but block out the sun, vast trunks disappearing into the tangled creepers far above, and the stifling air is so hot and humid that any warm-blooded intruder will quickly weaken and become sick. Thick tendrils of mist drift lazily above the dense mass of vegetation on the jungle floor, and it is impossible to hack a path through this sweltering hell without quickly losing all sense of direction. Few would-be explorers live long enough for disorientation and despair to be a problem. However, Lustria is home to a massive array of poisonous and deadly species, from the tiniest blood maggot to monstrous predators, similar in size and temperament to the ferocious drakes of the old world. The quagmires and bogs that pervade Lustria, into which an intruder can sink up to his waist when he believes he is on firm ground, harbor pockets of poisonous gas and choking lung blight. Through the murky, stinking mud slither pallid blind worms that burrow under the skin of their hosts, laying their eggs in the bloodstream and condemning them to an agonizing death as their voracious larvae hatch. But even the tiniest, most lethal spider or insidious parasite can be detected. A far deadlier threat is posed by the toxic strains of necrotic pox that lace the thick gruel of mud and decaying plant matter carpeting the jungle floor. Even the stoutest pair of boots will eventually admit some of this cloying black muck. Within hours, the feet inside will have turned raw, and within days, the wearer will have bled to death. The carnivorous millipedes and carrion ants that scuttle through the peaty bogs quickly reduce such corpses to skeletons, and the acidic jungle soil slowly claims each bloody shard of bone. All manner of foul parasites buzz around the heads of those who stumble through the mangrove swamps that blend from the jungle to the coastline. A single bite can cause delirium at best and a virulent flesh-eating disease at worst. These swamps harbor nests of leeches as long as a man's arm, their anesthetic bite allowing them to grow fat and bloated without discovery until their unwitting victim collapses into the water from blood loss. These unfortunates are easy prey for the massive crocodiles that lie patiently in wait under the shadow of the mangroves, exploding into a blur of violence when a trespasser strays into their hunting grounds. The merest drop of blood is sufficient to attract shoals of ravenous piranha, their feeding frenzy stripping the flesh from their victims in a sickening feast. At night the jungle resounds to the hideous roars and earth-shaking footsteps of its monstrous denizens, making sleep all but impossible. Those who have somehow found respite or collapsed with exhaustion often awake to find some of their number missing, dragged away in the night by silent predators. The dawn air is filled with great clouds of gnats and mosquitoes. Insects with wingspans taller than a man drone through the sullen twilight. Leathery winged pterodons drift from tree to tree hunting their prey, although the soft flesh of a traveler is a delicacy to these sharp-beaked avians. If a wanderer eventually winds his way far enough into the dark, cloying heart of the jungle, he will begin to see abandoned monuments and totems punctuating the unending ocean of vegetation. These savage and brutal icons precede the few areas of the jungle where it is possible to see the livid, storm-racked sky, sprawling clearings containing the stepped pyramids and spawning pools of the lizardmen. Clustered with great edifices and perpetually lashed by tropical rainstorms and violent cyclones, these megalithic temple cities form an invisible matrix of power that stretches across the continent. Such is the skill and strength of their creators, that despite the fury of the elements, they stand immutable, arrayed like great jagged teeth, across the heartland of the Lustrian jungle. Recent history. For thousands of years after the collapse of the polar gates, with the immediate threat of chaos thwarted, the lizardmen existed in relative seclusion while the world changed around them. The numbers of the slan had been greatly reduced while fighting back the tide of chaos, and the survivors had retreated deep into the jungles. Many of the great temple cities were ruined, and the slan had detached themselves from the affairs of mortals. Isolation. The slan mage priests were content for the elves to take over the care of many of the Old One's protective sites, and in time the elves forgot that they had not always belonged to them. Some of these were renamed and built over by the elves, and include the Citadel of Dusk, the Tower of the Rising Sun, and the original site of Tor Elessor. They were defenses originally constructed by the slan to hold the southern chaos wastes at bay, and to this day the High Elves continue to perform the tasks that enable these sacred places to operate as intended. The High Elves know of the existence of the slan, but are content to keep away from their jungles. Lustria existed in isolation for several thousand years, cutting off even from the lizardmen across the seas. The slan became increasingly dormant, entering longer and longer trance-like states as they tried to divine the best course of action. Having never been privy to the full subtlety and intricate details of the Old One's plan for the world, the mage priests now had to decide what they thought the Old Ones would have wished. As the older slan dropped into their timeless contemplation sleep, the younger slan were left to divine the Old One's intent. Chaos incursions. This age of recovery was interrupted several times as the powers of chaos waxed and waned like hateful tides. Every few thousand years, the roiling powers of chaos grow to such potency that they overwhelm the defenses of the slan and spill out into the world. As the dark tendrils of the chaos powers snake their way south of the northern realm of chaos, the minions of the chaos gods launch massive, devastating incursions. In these times, some slan stir from their contemplations to fight, while others enter an even deeper state of torpor, linking themselves to their brethren to reinforce the pressure exerted against the energy binding the chaos forces, slowly wearing it down and pushing it back. The slan generally remain separate from the physical struggle, for men, elves, and other races were intended to act as the predators of chaos and to fight on the front line in these wars. The coming of the Skaven. The coming of the rodent spawn, the Skaven, was foretold in the prophecy of Sotek, though only fragments of the prophetic text had survived the destruction of the temple city Chakwa. A millennia-spanning war broke out as the rat spawn ravaged Lustria, spreading their devastating plagues and diseases. The lizardmen strove to wipe this foul race from the world, for the Skaven had no part in the sacred and enlightened plan of the Old Ones. They were unnatural creatures, born into being with the coming of chaos. For this reason they were instantly declared enemies of the lizardmen, to be eradicated from existence. The vermin adapted well to the jungles and bred with such staggering speed that within a few decades they had spread across Lustria like a plague. Indeed, the rodents carried with them sickness and pestilence, and thousands of lizardmen succumbed to their virulent disease. The raids of the Dark Ones. While the Slann were battling against the rat spawn, the Dark Elves began raiding the jungles of Lustria. The Slann had not encountered these evil-natured beings before and did not differentiate between them and the High Elves, seeing them as the Old Ones had originally intended, as a single balanced race. The Dark Elves showed complete disregard for the wisdom and sovereignty of the Slann, striking with precision into the heart of Lustria. Though the dangers are many, the rewards are greater still. As swift and silent as a blade in the night, a lightning raid against the weaker, more isolated temples and shrines near the coast can reap great treasures, and the hag queens pay well for these artifacts of power that they covet so dearly, wrote the so-called Dark Scribe of Karond Kar. Thus began a new era of hatred and mistrust between the lizardmen and the elves, resulting in thousands upon thousands of sacrifices on either side, and the lizardmen becoming ever more aggressive and mistrustful towards all warm-blooded creatures invading their realm. This marked the first time in thousands of years that Lord Mazdamundi led his armies out of the jungles, sweeping northwards by the hidden paths into Nagaroth to retrieve their stolen artifacts. Returning victorious to Hexawatl, Mazdamundi exerted his vast power to raise a new mountain, effectively closing a valley behind his armies and cutting off the pursuit of the Dark Elf army of Klar Karand. Dark Elf raids have continued for thousands of years, met with savagery by the Saurus, and occasional retaliatory attacks northward from the jungles. The Rise of Sotek. Sotek reigns as the great serpent god of the lizardmen, and every temple city venerates his supreme divinity with a blood-soaked pyramid. Some believe that this foremost deity is one of the Old Ones returned, though most see him as a wholly different entity from the creators of the lizardmen. His coming was predicted in the prophecy of Sotek, brought to light in Chakwa by the renowned skink prophet Tehenowin, sometimes known as Tenahwini. The bloody god's emergence into the world would be signaled by the appearance of a two-tailed comet in the heavens, representing his forked tongue. The growth of the cult of Sotek started amongst the skinks, who offered up thousands of rat spawn in bloody sacrifices in his name, before spreading across all the lizardmen lands. It is said that sacrifices caused swarms of snakes and serpents to overwhelm the Skaven tunnels under Lustria, forcing Clan Pestilence to abandon them. Myths speak of Sotek himself, in the form of a gigantic serpent, ridding Lustria of the Skaven by pursuing them to the coast. He then plunged into the ocean, emerging even mightier in the Southlands. From there he slithered into the depths of the earth in his relentless pursuit of the Skaven, and now lurks there still, feeding endlessly on rat spawn and protecting his people from the Skaven menace. The appearance in the skies of the twin-tailed comet is received with rejoicing and blood sacrifices of thanks among the lizardmen, for they know that it heralds the reawakening of Sotek, who will strike down their foes with his furious anger. Men arrive. Passing decades turned into centuries, and entire civilizations were born and destroyed. The coming of men to the lands of Lustria had been predicted thousands of years earlier, carved into the plaque of the 300th cycle of the 2 moons in Itza. Nevertheless, the Old Ones had nurtured them, raising them from savagery. Their favored human children gave birth to the first great civilization of men in the land of the sun, as recorded on plaques from the temple city of Zlatlan. It had been predicted that men would arrive in the lands of Lustria in increasing numbers, and a time of darkness would begin. They knew of man's lust for gold, even if they did not understand it. Nevertheless, the race of man had been created by the will of the Old Ones, and formed a major part of the enigmatic Great Plan, and so they were not preyed upon unless their greed pushed them too far. While the elves were aware of the lizardmen within the jungles, even if their memories had been tainted and warped over countless generations of arrogance, the young race of mankind had no recollection of the ancient civilization hidden within Lustria, nor did they remember the servants of the Old Ones that weaned them towards civilization. To these people Lustria seemed a new world full of danger and riches, a land that could make a man's fortune or bring him death, for Lustria was plentiful in the precious metals that the young race of man coveted in its greed. Indeed, on many man-made maps, the Isthmus of Lustria is named the New World of Gold. The first men to arrive in Lustria were the Norse, led by the enterprising raider Lost Eriksson. His expedition stumbled upon Lustria after his longships were blown far off course by brutal storms. There they found wealth beyond their imagining, though he lost almost his entire crew within weeks due to the cruel environment. Within a decade, a Norse settlement was built upon Lustria and named Skeggi, in honor of Lost Eriksson's daughter, the first Norse child to be born upon that continent. Hundreds of years later, the word of this continent of gold had spread far and wide, and the interest in it grew. Treasure hunters and explorers began to travel to Lustria from the realms of Tilea, the Empire, Bretonia, and Cathay. Though many of their ships were stopped by the high elf fleets that patrolled the waters, some ships managed to slip through, particularly from the states of Tilea, whose smugglers and sailors are adept at avoiding unwanted attention. The New World of Gold has become a haven for pirates and reavers, who use its inlets and covers to hide while preying on the trade vessels plying the seas. For almost 1,000 years after the Norse colony of Skeggi was built, the human presence within Lustria was fairly inconsequential to the lizardmen. Explorers and adventurers made no major impact on the lands, while the seafaring Norsemen rarely tried to penetrate deep into the jungles. The hill fort's small population also posed no real threat to the might of the lizardmen of Hexoatl. It was only when the men of the Old World started to journey in large numbers to the New World that they began to make significant impact, founding a number of ports, such as Swamp Town, Kadavo, and Port Reaver. With the increase of seafaring traffic arriving on the shores of the New World, the greed of the humans has pushed them to ever-increasing raids inland. Such threats are ruthlessly quashed from time to time, as Lord Mazdamundi sends forth his armies to smash the humans' ramshackle towns and eliminate those who press too close to the ancient temples. The Amazons. Stories of the legendary Amazons, an all-female jungle tribe said to dwell within the depths of the jungles, have abounded since men first arrived in Lustria. In the Old World, the few scholars who believe the Amazons exist, or at least once existed, are generally of the opinion that these feral women were outcasts from the Norscan settlement Skeggi. This theory was recorded in the Journeys to the Dark Heart by the brilliant yet notoriously eccentric scholar Stillmensch. Other more controversial scholars have written that the Amazons were an entirely separate, yet related race, created by the gods for a specific divine purpose, although this theory has been much derided by the more respected authorities on such matters. Regardless, the mythology of the Amazons continues to flourish, and tales of vicious warrior women wielding strange weapons of power can still be heard in the drinking dens of Swamp Town and Sartosa. Shadows emerge. Several hundred years ago, a chaos horde rampaged through the human realm of Kislev in the wake of a powerful surge of magical energy from the realms of chaos. While the fledgling empire of man, led by Magnus the Pious, fought the minions of the chaos gods, the Slann roused from their contemplations and were once again forced to extend their powers to stem the tide of chaos energy that was rolling across the world. Even the spirit of the deceased venerable Lord Croak appeared to lend his wisdom and power. Now, once again, the threat of chaos has risen, and the winds of magic blow strongly. The first harbinger of the coming darkness was the battle for the Isle of Albion, an ancient seat of the Old One's power. Corrupted by the powers of chaos, some of those left to protect the isle turned to the dark gods, and the protective mists that had hidden Albion since its creation began to fade. Mercenaries and enterprising treasure hunters flocked to the island from across the seas, precipitating a bloody war for supremacy. The Slann were forced to act more directly to safeguard the ancient fortress of the Old Ones, and using mystical paths left by their creators, they sent a powerful army, led by the ancient Saurus Scar leader Krokgar, to drive away the warm-blooded interlopers. As their gods did at the dawn of the world, the Slann have begun to shape the island to suit their needs and restore the protective wards that guard against invasion. Thus begins the latest chapter in the history of the Lizardmen and the world as a whole. The Slann have divined that now is the time for them to start to put things in their proper order, to begin to curb the actions of the ignorant younger races, and to combat the hated threat of chaos head on. Temple cities. In the time of the Old Ones, each of the temple cities was a thriving community. Over the thousands of years that followed the departure of the Old Ones, many of the cities were overrun and fell into ruin, sacked and raided, their Slann mage priests lost from the world forever. Sometimes these cities have been reclaimed, their ancient secrets recovered, while others remain hidden by the dense jungles. Other temple cities have remained as thriving centers of activity. Each of the temple cities is carefully positioned to relate to specific constellations and various astral and stellar alignments, as well as relating to constellations in the skies. Each city lies along lines of power, crisscrossing the world. These ley lines link the temple cities, forming a web of energy that the Slann are able to tap into, enhancing their own powers of sorcery and communication. Huge stepped pyramid temples, rising above the seething jungle, stand at the center of each of the ancient Old One temple cities. Each of the temple cities is dedicated to a different founding Old One divinity, although within each city there are often numerous other pyramids dedicated to other blessed Old Ones, as well as Sotek. It is at the top of these pyramids that the most sacred rituals are performed, including bloody sacrifices and dedications to the gods. The temples are the heart of the cities, the focus of life for the Lizardmen. Hidden deep within them sit the deceased body shells of those Slann whose spirits have left their bodies, having been struck down in battle, or lost during the coming of chaos. Deeper still lie the barracks of the sacred Saurus warriors, the warriors of the Old One faith. From their subterranean cloisters they emerge, ready to fight under the direction of the Slann, or the eldest of Saurus, the Old Bloods. The Saurus are spawned in subterranean caverns beneath the barracks, producing warriors as needed. Sitting at the very top tier of the grandest pyramid in each city are the Slann. Sometimes the Slann will dwell within a temple room at the top, while others sit in their meditative states atop pillars protruding from the tip of the stepped monoliths. There they sit for years on end, protected from the wild Lustrian elements by a sphere of energy that encases them. The lines of power pass through the Slann, linking them to their brethren and allowing instantaneous communication between them. In their meditative states, the spirits of the Slann fly free, merging with those of their brethren, their thoughts and feelings compounding into a single consciousness. The spirit souls of deceased Slann join with those of the living, sharing their wisdom and collective experiences. Often a mirror-like pool of water surrounds the Slann, and it is said that the Slann can view far-off lands through this medium. Privileged skinks attend to the mage priest, patiently waiting on the ancient beings to rise from their meditations, and they record any proclamation that is uttered, whether verbally or telepathically. Standing wary nearby at all times are the Temple Guard, dedicated Saurus warriors whose sole existence centers on protecting the Slann, the living embodiment of the temples themselves. Situated around the temples at the heart of the temple cities are numerous paved causeways leading to the grand plaza with a great pyramid at its center. This pyramid is often flanked by a series of lesser pyramids dedicated to various Old One divinities. The causeways are bordered by towering stone carvings covered in glyphs and sculpted scenes reenacting myths and rituals, which are kept in good order by teams of skink artisans. In the central plaza of the mightiest of the temple cities are towering stone pillars, covered in the most ancient of glyphs and gleaming arcane devices. These form a gateway that the eldest Slann can open. The air ripples like water under the subtle manipulations of the mage priests, opening a gateway across the world. Entire armies of Saurus can be mobilized within hours, marching to battle against enemies in completely different continents, half a world away. Surrounding the pyramids are the skink barrios, forming the working suburbs of the city. Here the skinks pursue their crafts that enable the city to live and breathe. There are scribes, artisans, and sculptors, as well as vast numbers of workers and their overseers that scuttle about their tasks. Filled with frantic activity at all hours of the day, these tightly clustered stone buildings can hold teeming populations of thousands of skinks. The lives of these creatures are strictly ordered, each one knowing his duty and purpose within the whole, and day-to-day life is efficient and structured. On the outskirts of the city, amongst the encroaching jungles, are the skink spawning pools, areas that the Old Ones set aside for that purpose millennia past. With almost every new moon, a brood of hatchlings swarm from the waters ready to fulfill the purpose of their existence within the Slann's interpretation of the Great Plan. War against chaos. Harsh cries of exotic birds and the constant hum of insects filled the steaming jungle air. An occasional hum from a flock of small-winged pterosaurs picking at the rotting remains of a giant crocodile cut through the buzzing as something stirred in the distance. They looked up from their gory feast, blood dripping from their razor-toothed beaks. A sound like rumbling thunder reverberated through the ground, causing a cacophony of noise to erupt from the jungle canopy. Birds screeched in alarm, and monkeys howled in warning, as they bounded from branch to branch in agitation, adding to the tumultuous alarm of the jungle. The pterosaurs squawked shrilly and wheeled into the air. The booming became louder, accompanied by the crack of splintering tree trunks and the rasping of massive lungs. With a low-throated growl, the carnosaur burst through the jungle, smashing aside the branches of the ancient chaquan trees and trampling young saplings underfoot. Ignoring the branches and vines that whipped at his heavily scaled and pitted face, ancient Scar leader Kroq-Gar rode through the trees on the mighty Grimlock. The vicious carnosaur, whom he had ridden into battle for nearly 6 centuries, snapped its massive jaws at the fleeing pterosaurs. Without breaking stride, the colossal predator caught one of the winged creatures, gulping it down whole. Raising his heavy head, Kroq-Gar let out a throaty roar. Grimlock bellowed in response, the deafening sound echoing through the heavy, moisture-filled air, warning the now silent jungle that its king was hunting. Kroq-Gar hefted his long-bladed spear high into the air, rejoicing in the thrill of the chase, eagerly anticipating the slaughter he would unleash upon the despised interlopers who had dared encroach upon his domain. A dark green crest stealthily broke the murk amongst the mangroves, followed by a pair of slitted yellow eyes, as Teniqual raised his smooth-skinned head slightly above the water level. He blinked once, eyes picking up movement through the heavy fog hanging over the murky water. He could see dark shapes through the gloom on the shore nearby, and knew it was the hated enemy. His sensitive nostrils flattened as their tainted stench was carried to him on the slight breeze. Teniqual had been stalking the foe for 5 cycles of the sun, waiting for the perfect moment to attack. The time had arrived. The enemy were wading through the mud of the swamp, their heavy black armor caked in filth, concealing some of the hated symbols daubed onto the thick plates. Foul, sucking sounds accompanied every difficult step, yet the vanguard of the Chaos Warband continued on grimly. Some of the warriors had removed their enclosing helmets, revealing faces tinged a sickly pale blue. Their cheeks were covered in symbols carved into flesh, their eyes purest black. Teniqual regarded them coldly as they continued to labor through the heavy marsh, and his crest subtly changed color to warn those of his spawn kin behind him. A distant echoing roar reached Teniqual's ears, and he paused in readiness. He flicked out his blue tongue, tasting the air. After a moment's silence, he let out a shrill, chirruping call, and cocked his head to the side, listening. A low, rumbling growl answered him, rolling out across the water from further up the bank. Recognizing the resonating attack command of Scar veteran Bok Axe, he slipped silently through the water toward the warriors of chaos. Barely a ripple disturbed the water's surface as he and his skink-spawning kin swiftly approached their enemies. As he rose from the water in the shallows, Teniqual pulled a long dart from his salamander skin armband, its tip smeared with a dark green resin, and pushed it into the mouth of his blowpipe. Bok-Axe snarled as he broke into a lopping run toward the Chaos Warriors, raising his toothed weapon stronger than any man-made steel into the air. His saurus ran at his side, their lean, powerful bodies angled forwards, eager for the taste of blood. Nothing entered his mind save the battle. One group of saurus broke away to his right, instinctively encircling their prey. He saw the skinks emerging like wraiths from the water on the enemy's other flank. The Chaos Warriors yelled their defiance as they braced themselves for the impact of the saurus. Bok-Axe roared as he struck the first blow. His weapon smashed into a horned helmet, cleaving through metal and bone. The Scar veteran's shield arm lashed out, the barbs on his crescent-shaped shield ripping open the chest armor of a second warrior in a spray of blood. As the sound of battle erupted, Tenequal exhaled sharply, spitting a final dart at the enemy before nimbly spinning around and pouncing lightly back towards the safety of the water. A block of warriors had turned to confront the skinks after their first volley of darts, and they plunged after them deeper into the mud, sinking past their knees. With a leap, Tenequal and the other skinks dived into the shallows. The frustrated Chaos Warriors pursuing the skinks slowed, finding themselves sinking further into the clinging mud. Screams and inhuman roars accompanied the sound of weapons clashing behind them, and they turned to wade back out of the mangroves. A huge eruption from the water halted them. Massive scaled shapes burst from the river's edge with speed that belied their bulk, spraying water and mud in all directions and filling the air with deafening roars. There was a fleeting impression of strongly muscled creatures as they powered through the churning morass. They hefted huge weapons in thick hands, and their jaws were wide open to display a fearsome array of serrated teeth. The Croxagore in the lead chopped scythe-like with its immense weapon, hacking down into a Chaos Warrior's hip and smashing through dark armor as though it were cloth. The weapons clove the man in two and embedded itself deep into the mud. The powerful blow swung the Croxagore's body around, and it used this momentum to smash another warrior from his feet with its thick, spike-strapped tail. With its weapon trapped in the mud, the Croxagore lunged forward, crushing another enemy's helmet with powerful teeth, metal wrenched out of shape under the pressure. The Croxagore shook its heavy jaws from side to side, ripping the warrior's head from its shoulders. Scar leader Croc-Gar looked through the shady, twisted branches of the Chakwan tree with the hungry eyes of a predator. Grimlock let out a dangerous growl and flared his nostrils, filling the air with steaming breath. Croc-Gar could feel the Carnosaur tensing beneath him at the sight of the prey. The Scar leader yanked sharply on the skin of the Carnosaur's neck with his ensorcelled, gauntleted hand to keep the beast from launching into the open immediately. Croc-Gar's attention was torn from the main battle by the sound of pounding hooves. A group of black-armored knights thundered along the firmer ground near the tree line, kicking their snarling steeds onward to attack the flank of the saurus. Grimlock strained under Croc-Gar's hold, the scent of blood overpowering his senses, and thick ropes of saliva dripped from between his serrated teeth as the knights passed them. Croc-Gar released his hold and kicked the Carnosaur forwards. With a deafening, blood-hungry roar, Grimlock burst from the jungle, his powerful claws ripping great rents in the muddy earth. The knights' steeds reared in terror as the mighty predator closed on them. With a swipe of one of its forelegs, the Carnosaur broke the legs of one of the steeds and closed its immense jaws around another's neck, cutting its cry short. Hrothgar lanced his spear downwards, thrusting it through the body of a knight. The barbed blade exploded through the heavily armored warrior's chest in a spray of gore. Grimlock swung his heavy head, smashing a steed to the ground. The knight fell heavily into the mud, and a thrust from Hrothgar's long barbed weapon ensured that he would not be rising. Pinning another of the Chaos mounts with its forelegs, Grimlock raked its flanks with one of his powerful hind legs, curved claws ripping skin and flesh to ribbons, before he ended the creature's torment with a powerful snapping of his jaws. Dark-bladed weapons hacked into the Carnosaur's flanks, yet the creature barely registered the blows in its furious lust for slaughter. Dripping with gore, the Carnosaur rose up on his hind legs and roared once more, reveling in the glorious fulfillment of the hunt. Hrothgar's own feelings of exultation mirrored those of Grimlock, and he dispatched another foe with a brutal thrust through the neck. Glancing around, searching for more opponents to vent his rage, he saw the enemy scattered and fleeing into the jungle. This day, they would hunt well. The lost children of the fallen gods, a lizard-man bestiary. Slan mage priests. The Slan are the last of a dwindling race that has existed for countless thousands of years. They were the favored servants of the Old Ones, and traveled across the stars with their god-like masters. Favored for their considerable intelligence and magical abilities, they now rule the Lizardmen as a caste of mage priests. Large, unhealthy creatures, the Slan are quite unlike anything else in the world. Their heads are large to match the mighty intellect held within, and their eyes are bulbous and all-seeing. They can live for thousands of years, and their bodies become more bloated with the passing centuries. They perceive time differently to the short-lived mortal creatures of the world, and slip into extended periods of contemplation and thought that can last decades or even centuries at a time. Endlessly they ponder the meaning of time and the mysteries of the universe. To their attendants they often appear to be in a sleep-like trance, with signs of life limited to the occasional blink. Yet the Slan are more truly aware of the magnitude of the universe than any other being in the world. When the Slan stir from their meditative states, they often declare an enigmatic prophecy or proclamation that skink attendants dutifully attempt to record. Often these statements require careful study and interpretation, and the true meaning may never become apparent for 1,000 years or more. All the Slan alive today in the world are the same ones who once served the Old Ones, though they were all spawned on this world after the Old Ones' arrival. Those few Slan that travel from across the stars have long since passed from the world, with not a trace left of their existence. There were 5 spawnings of Slan made by the Old Ones after their arrival, and no more have been spawned since the great catastrophe when chaos entered the world. So it is that the Slan are the last of a dying race, and even the youngest is over 7,000 years old. Their numbers are slowly dwindling, never to be replaced. They are very rarely slain in combat, for they will usually magically teleport themselves out of danger before a killing blow is landed. The husk bodies of those who are somehow killed are mummified and entombed beneath the temple cities, and they are venerated as much as ever they were in life. However, so strong is their consciousness that the Slann are able to hold their spirits in this world. Even when their physical bodies are slain, they are still able to influence the world through their arcane powers, as well as communicating with their living Slann brethren and appearing to the skink priests in visions and dreams. The Slann of the first spawning died many thousands of years ago, and their mummified corpses are venerated as holy relics. So strong is their spirit that they can still affect the world around them, manipulating the winds of magic and advising the younger Slann. It is believed that only 5 Slann of the second spawning remain, ruling the greatest temple cities in Lustria. They are the most powerful of the creatures left in existence, and the ones who spend the most time in meditative states. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th spawnings of Slann are more common than their ancient forebears, and yet are still immeasurably ancient beings that can remember a time before elf or dwarf history began. Some of these younger Slann have even been known to shift their weight on occasion, though such occurrences are momentous and rare, and it is these younger generations who are more inclined to warfare and aggression. As the Slann have begun to get more agitated by the passing concern of the spread of chaos, so they too have become more active in the world. Their armies have been mustering, and even the most ancient Slann has readied himself for war. In battle, a Slann's hovering platform gently glides forwards, borne aloft by ancient magics and the will of the Slann himself, surrounded by devoted Saurus warriors. From his reclining position, the Slann gestures with multi-jointed fingers, unleashing devastating magic against all who defy him. The Slann know that they were entrusted with the task of maintaining and completing the grand design of the Old Ones. The known world is but a small element in this awesome, universal plan. Since the time of the fall when the stellar gates imploded, the world was polluted with chaos, and the Old Ones vanished forever. The Slann have religiously attended to their sacred task that they hope to accomplish before their own race dies out. No matter what elves or dwarves or men may think or do, the Slann will endeavor to serve the Old Ones faithfully to the end of time, or until they disappear from the world. All other lizardmen live only to serve the Slann and help them in their cosmic task, and the Slann do not tolerate anything or anyone that would stand in the way of them completing their sacred duty. Saurus warriors. Saurus are ferocious creatures, bred by the Old Ones specifically for the purpose of war and protection. They are powerful warriors whose entire bodies have been designed for combat. Bony crests protect their heads and necks, and tough scales run down their backs and arms. Even unarmed Saurus are perfectly capable of slaying their enemies, for their tails and limbs are equipped with all manner of naturally hard spurs and talons, and their jaws are powerful enough to break a man's arm. Some have remarked that Saurus are dull-witted and stupid creatures, yet this is a simplistic view of these dangerous beings. It is true that they have little in the way of verbal communicative skills, and can perform only the simplest of tasks outside of warfare, yet their cunning and innate intelligence has simply been guided in a certain direction for a very specific purpose. In times of war, skinks defer to the oldest Saurus, for combat is their realm, and they have an instinctive understanding of battle tactics and warfare. Saurus are spawned in dark pools in the caverns beneath the temple cities. From the moment they are grown enough to crawl from the spawning pools, they know how to fight and conduct warfare. Many are the accounts of the Saurus launching perfectly timed ambushes and maneuvers, even when it might seem to an outside observer that there was no communication amongst the Saurus themselves. Entire spawnings occasionally produce Saurus warriors that have slightly different natural abilities and skills than their brethren. Some say that the old ones foresaw the future and could predict when warriors with particular skills would be needed, and so the seemingly random spawnings are all part of the old one's careful calculations. These spawnings are regarded as blessings from the gods themselves, sent to aid the Slann in their sacred duty. One of the spawnings that has become more common in the temple cities in the last decades is the birth of Saurus warriors that come into the world instinctively knowing how to ride and control the dangerous cold ones. These creatures are vicious and dim-witted and make powerful mounts for those able to ride them. It is believed it is the blessing of Zunki becoming manifest in the jungles that allows these Saurus to ride cold ones, and an indication that these fast-moving warriors will be necessary in the coming wars. The Temple Guard are another variant spawning, a subspecies of Saurus created to protect the Slann. They are spawned with more heavily armored scales than other Saurus, and instinctively have an unshakable resolve to guard the Slann at any cost. They do so with utter determination until death overcomes them. The longer Saurus live, the tougher and more ferocious they become. Their scales become thicker and harder, and their warlike instincts seem to become more honed. The Saurus Scar veterans and old bloods are ancient beings, some having been alive for several thousand years. Indeed, it has never been known for a Saurus to die of old age, for war is their life, the sole reason for their being. Skinks. Skinks are small, agile, intelligent creatures bred by the old ones from the giant amphibious creatures that have inhabited the Lustrian swamps since the dawn of time. They were created to perform the mundane jobs that required a quick mind and nimble fingers, and as such, they perform many varied roles, such as translators, scribes, artisans, and administrators. Highly organized and social beings, skinks communicate quickly and effectively, and are perfectly adapted to ensure the smooth day-to-day running of the temple cities. They instinctively work well in large groups, following the signals of their leaders, often communicated through subtle changes in crest hues, as well as vocal commands to accomplish complicated tasks with quick efficiency. In times of war, skinks often take up their weapons to fight alongside Saurus, yet they are not born warriors, and their skittish nature will often see them flee from strong resistance. Despite this, they are stealthy and swift creatures, and can be deadly when using their favored weapons, in particular the blowpipe, against an unwary foe. This makes them exceptionally good hunters, stalking through the dense jungles and killing any warm-blooded creatures that dare venture into their world. The skinks have a natural affinity to water, and can swim swiftly through the dark jungle swamps and rivers, often staying submerged for up to an hour in order to launch a surprise attack before disappearing into the jungle. Skinks are skilled hunters and coat their weapons with lethal toxins distilled from the poisonous amphibians and serpents that dwell in the hot, steamy jungles. Very occasionally, a spawning will result in just a single skink being hatched, These skinks tend to be particularly attuned to the magical energies in the world, or destined to become mighty heroes, and will often become prophets, priests, or attendants to the slan, or perhaps mighty hunter-warriors. It is they who tend to the shrines of the Old Ones and perform the rituals of sacrifice. Chameleon skinks are a subspecies of skink that have a number of characteristic peculiarities that distinguish them. The chameleons are more aggressive than other skinks, and their role centers on scouting, infiltration, concealment, and hunting. They stalk their prey through the jungles, whether that prey be food or intruder, and are able to move to within yards of their target without being noticed. This is chiefly due to their chameleonic skin that can shift in texture and color in a heartbeat to match the surroundings. Chameleon skinks have large protruding eyes that can move independently, allowing them to see all around them while remaining perfectly motionless. Indeed, they have been known to stay unmoving for hours on end, awaiting the perfect moment to launch an ambush. Chameleon skinks are an unusual spawning that in more recent years have returned to the world after almost becoming little more than a memory, being originally bred only in the sacred spawning pools of the pyramid city of Pahwaks. The breed almost died out after the city was destroyed, soon after the fall of the polar gates. In recent years, chameleon skinks have started to spawn in several of the spawning pools across Lustria and the Southlands. The fact that they have spontaneously begun to spawn again has been interpreted by many skink prophets as part of the Old One's plan. The divinities have deemed it necessary for them to return to the world, whether this is due to the growing chaos threat, or because the gods deem that chameleons are needed for the lizardmen to expand their realm, is mere speculation, and skink prophets argue about exactly what the return of the chameleons might herald for the lizardmen race. Jungle swarms. The primordial jungles of the lizardmen are overrun with thousands of snakes and reptiles. These range from tiny, highly venomous creatures to massive lizards and pythons. Serpents are sacred to Sotek, and invoking his favor with blood sacrifice before a battle can cause huge swarms of serpents and reptiles to appear from the undergrowth and slither ahead and along the flanks of the lizardmen armies as they march. They wash around the legs of the foes of their god Sotek in a deadly wave, hissing and spitting, plunging their fangs into unprotected flesh. They make any sort of travel through the lands of the lizardmen extremely perilous, for they slither into camps and force intruders to watch every step they take, snapping the resolve and will of even the hardiest warrior. Kroxigor. The Kroxigor are giant cousins of the Saurus, bred for their brute strength and power. They are large, powerful creatures, yet their intellect and speech abilities are far more limited than those of the Saurus. Nevertheless, they obey their instructions diligently, showing that they understand rather more than might be thought from their brutish appearance. They are terribly strong creatures, able to bear enormous loads, and in battle are given heavy weapons to smash the enemy with. These weapons are often chained and bound to the arms, wrists, and tails of the Kroxigor, so that they do not drop them, for the most natural and instinctive way for Kroxigor to fight is with their massive clawed hands and teeth. The Kroxigor are heavily armored with natural scaling, and bony protrusions protect their stooped backs. Salamanders. Salamanders are giant predatory amphibians that inhabit the swamplands and estuaries of the jungles. They are swift-moving creatures on both land and water, and voracious hunters. Their favored method of catching land-based prey is to swiftly close the distance submerged in water. Once within range, they launch a burst of highly corrosive flaming liquid from their gullet that burns and incapacitates their prey before devouring them with their powerful jaws. Within their bodies is an organ that produces this fiery venom, and the salamander will spout it if provoked or while hunting. The large sail of taut skin on a salamander's back is thought to act as a cooling mechanism to ensure that the cold-blooded creature does not expire from the fiery heat created within its body. They have a vicious temperament, but despite this, they are sometimes captured and raised by skink handlers who use them to hunt the larger creatures dwelling in the jungles. In battle, salamanders are directed towards the foe, though so aggressive are the creatures that they need little encouragement. Indeed, it is often the case that the skinks must restrain them to prevent the salamanders from launching themselves straight into the enemy. Pterodons. Dwelling in the jungle canopy hundreds of meters above the ground, pterodons are dangerous predators. Their keen eyesight can pierce the gloom of the jungle, enabling them to spot potential prey at great distances. They prey on anything man-sized and smaller, from birds soaring above the trees to ground-dwelling animals and intruders on the jungle floor. Their huge, leathery wings can propel them at great velocity, and they are surprisingly agile, able to fly at full speed through thick jungle while avoiding branches, vines, and trees. They are also expert gliders and can remain airborne for days on end, utilizing the steamy, hot thermals that rise from the jungle. Skinks have mastered the skill of riding pterodons. These pterodon riders are exceptionally useful in battle, flying ahead of the main army, scouting the position of the enemy, and striking suddenly and silently from above. The skinks launch javelins from the backs of the pterodons, and the dangerous creatures themselves attack with their long beaks filled with razor-sharp teeth. Descending with mighty beats of their powerful wings, they attempt to latch onto their foes with their strong claws, ripping them into the air before dropping them to plummet to their doom. Stegodons. The hostile jungles are home to a phenomenal array of creatures, almost all deadly in their own way. Stegodons are among the largest and most aggressive of all. They are ancient creatures that were living in the jungles of Lustria when the Old Ones first arrived. Gigantic armored beasts, they feed on almost anything they come across, from the lush vegetation and the trunks of vast forest trees to the flesh of any creature foolish enough to get in their way. They are strong enough to uproot entire trees, and they can crack stone with their heavy footfalls. In the heat of the jungle, the stegodons cool themselves by wallowing in the swamps, relying on their thick, scaly hide to protect them from crocodiles and the gigantic predatory fish that infest the waters. Massive horns project from the stegodons' armored crests, and their bodies are covered in spikes and bony armor plating. Their tails are heavy and barbed, and can be swung with devastating force. Highly territorial, a stegodon will charge any creature invading its territory, destroying anything in its path. Disputes between rival male stegodons can be heard for miles around, their roars reverberating through the jungle as the massive beasts fight. Often these battles last for days on end, and are resolved only when one of the competitors has been slain to be consumed by the victor. In battle, howdahs are attached to the backs of these giant beasts, crewed by a flock of skinks. Stegodons are terrifying and lethal in battle, crushing anything beneath their massive bulk and scattering the enemies of the lizardmen. Carnosaurs. Carnosaurs are terrifying giant predators that stalk the darkness of the primordial jungles. They are the most dangerous and aggressive of all the countless deadly creatures within the jungle, and are vicious and unrelenting hunters. Large enough to take down almost any prey, carnosaurs are the top predator of the jungle, and have been known to attack even the mighty stegodons on occasion. A fight between these two beasts is a titanic sight, a battle that often leaves the survivor badly wounded. Carnosaurs are built for speed and power, and their crushing jaws can rip huge chunks of flesh from their prey. Occasionally, a precious carnosaur egg is stolen from its nest by brave skink hunters and brought to the temple cities to be incubated. It is a dangerous job to retrieve one of these eggs, for the rage of a carnosaur mother is beyond imagining. These eggs are highly treasured, and eventually a baby carnosaur breaks free from it, aided by attentive skinks who are dwarfed by the infant beast. Even as newborns, they are vicious and can bite a skink in half. Carefully reared by teams of skinks, these carnosaurs are trained for battle, eventually becoming accustomed to having a war harness attached to their bodies and slowly learning to take directions from a rider. Only the most powerful Saurus warriors ride them to battle, and it takes much skill and strength to keep the beast under control. Nevertheless, once battle has been joined, the smell and taste of blood is enough to send carnosaurs into a vicious, bloody frenzy, and they become completely intent on killing and almost totally uncontrollable. Slan generations. There were 5 original spawnings of Slan created by the Old Ones after they arrived on the world, and none have been spawned since their departure. Each of the different spawnings had a particular role to play in the Old Ones' plans, and each of them wields unfathomable power. Much of their power is purely instinctual, for they are naturally gifted and magical beings, and their grasp on manipulating the winds of magic are unparalleled. They are the unmatched masters of the magical arts. Indeed, they were its first true practitioners, and it was they who taught the arts of sorcery to the elves in millennia long past. Sacred spawnings. The servants of the Slan mage priests are hatched in spawning pools, where they develop from tiny carnivorous tadpole-like creatures into the bipedal beings they are when they pull themselves free of the water. Skinks and croxagores are spawned in pools on the outskirts of the temple cities, while saurus are hatched in the dank subterranean tunnels beneath the temples themselves, as befitting their role as sacred warriors. On occasions, entire spawn broods are hatched under the influence of one or more of the gods, displaying certain characteristics and natural abilities different from the other spawnings. Those hatched in such a manner are revered as particularly sacred warriors chosen to be the representatives of the gods in the world. Throughout the centuries, various sacred spawnings have waxed and waned, some disappearing altogether for thousands of years before reappearing. In times long past, saurus were frequently spawned under the influence of 2 or even 3 gods, though very few of these ancient warriors remain in the world. Many see this as being predetermined many thousands of years ago by the Old Ones, for it is said that they studied the paths of the many futures and determined when particular spawnings were needed. That so many spawnings have reappeared in recent decades seems to indicate that a new time of warfare and aggression is upon the Lizardmen. The Ancients. Lord Mazdamundi. Lord Mazdamundi is the oldest and most powerful living mage priest. For thousands of years he has ruled the temple city of Hexawatl, and never has that city fallen to the constant raids of the enemy. His power of geomancy is unparalleled. It is said that Mazdamundi was instructed in these arts by the god spirit of the mysterious Old One Teapot. Such is Mazdamundi's power that with a slow and deliberate gesture he caused devastating earthquakes to rip open the land itself, swallowing the human settlement of Kadavo after consistent raiding from the settlers. It is said that it was he that made the volcanoes of the Red Mountains erupt, destroying the lands around them, and that the earthquakes that racked many of the dwarf holds in antiquity were caused by him. His wisdom is great, and every action he takes has been carefully deliberated over, though it is often impossible for outsiders to fathom his long-reaching vision. When the armies of Hexawatl march to war, Lord Mazdamundi will often lead them, borne aloft upon the back of a mighty stegodon. He controls this massive beast through sheer force of will, and Mazdamundi's fury, when roused, is terrifying to behold. It is said that there is not a wizard alive in the world that can match his powers of the magical arts, and that even his mere presence forces all but the most strong-willed individuals to drop their gaze. Nakai, sacred Kroxagore of the first spawning. The ancient Kroxagore known as Nakai the Wanderer is a sacred and revered creature. It is regarded by skink priests as some kind of powerful jungle spirit given form, appearing out of the jungles in times of need, before disappearing once more. The gnarled Kroxagore has appeared all across the Lustrian continent throughout the centuries, usually just hours before a battle takes place. Sometimes the appearance of Nakai is all that has alerted isolated temples of a forthcoming raid. It is believed that Nakai was originally spawned in Tlankla during the time of the first spawnings. His body is protected by much heavier natural armor than the Kroxagore of later spawnings, and he is covered in scars and battle wounds that he has sustained over the years. He has survived the most heinous of injuries that would be fatal for any other creature. When he appears, the skink priests treat him with great deference, adorning him with ceremonial war gear, and renewing the gold plates and sacred decorations that are hammered into his toughened skin and horns before he enters battle. Tehenowin, prophet of Sotek. Tehenowin, variously translated disparagingly by humans as Tenahwini and Tinahuan, was the first prophet of the serpent god Sotek. After horrific plagues racked the population of Chakwa, with all the mage priests and thousands of skinks succumbing to the yellow fever, it was Tehenowin who unified the remaining population and led them from the tainted city. He brought forth from the Great Pyramid the forgotten plaques of Chakwa that spoke of the coming of Sotek, and made them into a totem standard which was carried at the forefront of the migrating red-crested skinks. He proclaimed the imminent arrival of the bloodthirsty serpent god Sotek as predicted in the sacred prophecy of Sotek. The appearance of the twin-tailed comet burning its way across the sky was proof of the coming of this deity. Wherever they went, Tehenowin prophesied Sotek's emergence, and sacrifices to him were made day and night, as endless lines of captured Skaven were offered up to the serpent god. Thus it was that Tehenowin was the harbinger of the cult of Sotek, and worship of this vengeful god spread throughout Lustria, and across the Southlands. On one night, the full moon was touched with the color of gore, and Sotek arose into the world, drenched in the blood of innumerable Skaven sacrifices. Thousands of snakes and poisonous serpents swarmed before him, a living carpet that swept the Skaven before them, driving them from Lustria. From that day forward, a bloody welt in the shape of a serpent was burnt into the forehead of Tehenowin, marking him as the favorite of Sotek. He disappeared into the deepest jungles and was never heard of again. Some say that he resides amongst the jungles of the Southlands, using his power as the avatar of Sotek to wage his own war against the Skaven there. The Venerable Lord Croak. In hidden crypts deep within the holds of the oldest temples lie the sacred mummified remains of deceased Slann. The spirit of a dead mage priest often hovers near its dried body husk, and magical energy pulses through the air around the corpse. It is unknown how much these Slann spirits are able to manipulate the corporeal world, though many prophets believe that their influence is substantial, if not always apparent. Venerable Lord Croak is the oldest and most revered of all these relic priests. He is said to have been the first Slann that was spawned in the world, the most powerful of the first spawning of mage priests, an integral part of the Old One's great plan. His spirit stubbornly refused to leave this plane of existence when his body was slain. In the temple city of Itza, plaques recording the history of the Slann relate that Lord Croak was present at the birth of the world, and therefore fated to be present at its end. Offerings and prayers are devoted to this venerable Slann, and all who look into his inlaid eyes can sense the power still residing there. Lord Croak was the last of the first generation Slann to be slain during the first coming of chaos. The story of his resistance to chaos is recorded in part on the walls of his tomb. In these pictograms it tells how Lord Croak banished 12 greater demons and slaughtered entire armies of demonic entities with his awesome magical powers. The moon rose and fell. Months passed, and still Lord Croak battled on. Eventually, as his brethren were gradually worn down and torn apart by the demons, Lord Croak too succumbed to the relentless and never-ending horde. Though his body was slain, the demons could not harm his powerful spirit that refused to leave the world. The unnatural creatures exploded back into their raw magical elements as they tried to claw at the glowing white spirit form. Once his fallen body was returned to its resting place at Itza, Lord Croak was sheathed in gold and holy bindings, decorated to befit a being closest of all creatures to the gods themselves. His preserved cadaver is an extremely holy relic that harkens back to a time when the great plan, under the careful direction of the Old Ones, was still continuing in the correct manner. On occasions of grand ceremony, his mummified remains are brought forth from its crypt in Itza. Resplendent in ritual gold decoration, this archaic relic priest has been borne into battle on countless occasions through the centuries, his lifeless corpse sitting serenely on an ancient dais. All those in the presence of Lord Croak are humbled, for he has witnessed countless thousands of generations, and even the elves feel a sense of their own mortality when in his presence. In his lifetime, Croak witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, saw entire continents emerge from the seas, only to sink once more beneath the waves, and was instrumental in the formation and destruction of the mountains themselves. As entire races bloomed and faded into extinction, this venerable Slann has sat unmoving, watching the world change. In battle, the roused spirit of Lord Croak can be felt hovering near the mage priest's cadaverous body. Some powerful wizards can actually perceive this ancient spirit, a blurred shape of pure glowing light hanging in the air, projecting an unmatched aura of power. The spirit of Lord Croak can possess the body of a willing supplicant and work its magic through its host's body, often leaving the host reeling and mindless from the unnatural power. For the skink priests, this is a great honor, an experience of holy significance and transcendence, for Lord Croak has been deified to such an extent that in Itza, offerings are made to him, as well as to Sotek and the Old One gods. Ancient Scar Leader Krok-Gar. Scar Leader Krok-Gar is an ancient Saurus warrior from the now ruined temple city of Huatl, nestled in a deep jungle valley in the spine of Sotek Mountains. Having lived for thousands of sun revolutions and fought in countless wars, Krok-Gar has witnessed much change in the world in his time, yet his mind is solely focused on battle, as is the way with all Saurus. The spawning that bore Krok-Gar into the world produced only a handful of Saurus, though each of them was a powerful creature marked out for greatness, blessed by Huatl himself. Their natural cunning and instinctive aggression surpassed those of their brethren, and they had an innate domination over the native beasts of the surrounding jungle. Many of these usually aggressive creatures would cower under their hard gaze. Krok-Gar's spawning coincided with the rearing of a brood of carnosaurs, and he claimed the most aggressive and volatile of the carnosaurs as his own. The Great Cataclysm, the collapse of the polar warp gates, occurred only centuries after Krok-Gar had hatched. Demons spread like a rampant plague of horror and death across the world. The Old Ones had disappeared, and all seemed lost. Krok-Gar and his spawning brethren rode on constant patrols around the outskirts of Huatl, smashing entire armies of demons that sought to strike against the sacred temple city, holding the never-ending forces at bay. While Krok-Gar and his warriors held back the physical demonic onslaught, the ancient mage priest Chakwo-Quantl focused on the magical defense of the city. Sitting unmoving atop the temple of Huatl, with 6 younger Slan arrayed around, they pooled their power in an attempt to hold the forces of chaos back. The magical barriers they exerted around the city were being slowly worn down by the screaming demonic entities. The other temple cities were also under siege, and so little energy could be diverted from them to the aid of Huatl. Eventually, after nearly 30 cycles of the sun, a crack appeared in the magical defenses of the Slan, and one of the mage priests was overcome by a surge of uncontrolled energy. His soul was ripped apart by insubstantial claws, and a demonic presence manifested itself through his flesh. Within moments, it had torn apart the other Slan, who were deep in concentration, and the full power of chaos was let loose across Huatl. By the time Krok-Gar fought his way into the center of the city, it was in ruin, and the entire population had been slaughtered. Completely surrounded, Krok-Gar and his warriors fought back to back as the demonic hordes repeatedly surged against them, slowly wearing them down. Krok-Gar's Saurus were cut down one by one until barely a handful were still fighting, though these few managed to send the last of the demons attacking Huatl screaming from existence. Though his temple city was in ruins and the mage priests slain, Krok-Gar continued leading his swift-moving hunting patrols through the jungles surrounding the city. scouring them for demons and slaughtering all they came across. Eventually, the immediate chaos threat dissipated, and the demon armies were shattered. As passing decades turned into centuries, Kroq-Gar continued to lead the surviving army of Huatl through the jungle, hunting out any interlopers foolish enough to venture into his realm. Kroq-Gar was chosen by the great Lord Mazdamundi to lead the first Saurus war party to Albion. He was given the sacred duty of driving all warm bloods from the island, earning the Scar leader a fearful reputation as hundreds of enemies were slain at his hands. The native tribesmen believe him to be a spirit of destruction that was roused and angered by the disturbances on the isle, and regularly leave devotions for him to appease his furious anger. Nevertheless, Kroq-Gar has no sense of mercy within his cold-blooded heart for any who obstruct his duty, even if they have no knowledge of doing so. Kroq-Gar's fast-moving raiding attacks have slowly been driving back the inhabitants of Albion, both native and those recently arrived. Whether he slaughtered every warm blood on the island, or merely drove them from the shores, he cared not, for his duty would be fulfilled. With the new city of Conquata under construction, and jungle spreading through the interior of Albion, Kroq-Gar has secured a strong holding point for the Lizardmen, and a place from where they can begin their own offensive. His duty done, he has since led his army back to Lustria. The Southlands. Far to the south of the old world, beyond the mysterious realm of Araby in the land of the dead, lies the continent known as the Southlands. Its northern landmass is a barren wasteland of deserts, studded with dusty and deserted tomb cities, while further south it is a land of unspoiled jungle and swamp, isolated from the realms of man, elf, and dwarf for uncounted centuries. Many brave or foolish explorers and treasure hunters, though the two are often indistinguishable, have attempted to penetrate the thick jungles that make up the majority of the southern region of this land, but almost all have never been seen or heard of again. Ancient legends tell that the Southlands was once joined to the continent of Lustria, and this is borne out by the many identical species of flora and fauna indigenous to both. The hidden city of Zlatlan is said to have been founded before the continents were split asunder, and certainly there are lizardmen to be found on both sides of the world pond, as the lizardmen call the great ocean. Over the centuries, various races have set sail for the Southlands, drawn by tales of riches to be discovered within its unexplored depths, though few have returned with anything other than tales of misery and death. The elves of Ulthuan have an outpost on the southern tip of the continent, ostensibly to control the sea routes leading to their homeland, but even their fearsome dragon ships are unable to deter reckless treasure hunters sailing towards the Southlands. It is also said that the dwarves have a stronghold named Carrick-Zorn on the edge of the mountains that form the spine of the continent. But if this is true, none have heard from its inhabitants in many years. Perhaps only the lizardmen of the Southlands know for sure what became of the dwarves, but if this is the case, then it is likely that no one will ever know for sure the Carrack's eventual fate. None of those who have ventured south to explore the steaming jungles of the Southlands could hack their way more than a few miles into the impenetrable web of trees, vines, and swamps without becoming hopelessly lost. Despite the horrendous difficulties inherent in an expedition to the Southlands, tales persisted of the lost city of Zlatlan, and many conflicting reports as to its location were present by those who claimed to have seen its golden, stepped pyramids and glyph-lined avenues. Such discrepancies cannot be accounted for by simple incompetence, and has led to many scholars and cartographers to conclude that there must be many more cities, as yet undiscovered, deep within the jungle. Cut off from the wisdom of the most venerable of the slan mage priests of Lustria, the lizardmen of the Southlands have fallen prey to their baser animal instincts, and only the younger, in relative terms, slan, those in the 4th and 5th generations, remain in the Southlands to provide any guidance to the lizardmen. Over the centuries, the slan on Lustria have attempted to re-establish contact with their lost spawn, but such communication is sporadic and erratic at best. In addition to the loss of their master's ancient guidance, the few spawning pools in existence spawn less and less frequently, and many of the warrior lizards such as Saurus do not arise in any meaningful numbers. As a result, lizardman society has begun to devolve. The spawning pools in the caverns below their cities simply do not spawn as regularly as the slan feel they should. But they accept that this is the will of the Old Ones. Without great numbers of Saurus to fight their battles, the slan of the Southlands are forced to rely on skinks to defend them, and use the few Saurus which have come so naturally to them. The small number of Saurus who were spawned were primarily those destined to become temple guard, and this has been seen as a sign that the designs of the Old Ones are unfolding as they had planned. Similarly, the lizardmen colonies on the Dragon Isles to the east of the Southlands were cut off from their masters many centuries ago, but the degradation of their culture was much more rapid and pronounced. Without any slan, they have reverted completely to barbarism, becoming little more than animals, and destroying what little remained of their former glory in bitter conflict. Whether the slan of Lustria have attempted to establish communications with the lost kin, or have simply abandoned them to their fate is unclear, but certainly there has been little or no contact between Lustria and the Dragon Isles for hundreds of years. None of the explorers who have attempted to establish colonies upon the Dragon Isles have succeeded, and thus the fate of the lizardmen here is also accepted as part of the grand design of the Old Ones. Languages and glyphs. The language spoken by the lizardmen is known as Saurian. In its most pure form, it is a highly complicated tongue that has proved impossible for other races to understand or pronounce. As a form of speech, it was taught first to the slan by the Old Ones themselves. It is doubtful that the Old Ones used or had need of this language, communicating amongst themselves and the slan using silent, telepathic means. Nevertheless, they had need for their minions to speak, and so the Saurian tongue was developed. Although Saurian can be a complex form of speech, it is also a tongue that any of the lizardmen can use. Particular types of lizardmen use only what they need to effectively communicate in their arena within their society. The skinks are the most vocal and social of the lizardmen, and they speak Saurian utilizing long, eloquent, and laboriously constructed sentences. Their speech is peppered with clicks and vibrating croaks, as well as being enhanced through constant gesticulation and subtle changes of crest hue. Despite seeming chaotic and indecipherable to outsiders, the skink's usage of Saurian is precise and well articulated, with the slightest change in inference and tone able to dramatically alter their meaning. The slan mage priests, although undoubtedly having the greatest understanding of the Saurian tongue, use it only sparingly, usually preferring to communicate solely with their powerful minds. When they do speak aloud, they often use phrases and words long since forgotten, fallen out of use, or just unknown outside of the Slan themselves. Even so, their spoken proclamations are often reduced to a bare minimum of enigmatic words. It is then up to the skink interpreters to attempt to decipher these profound words of wisdom. Thus, around each temple pyramid, there are often huddles of skinks debating different interpretations of the dictates of their master. The Saurus speak the most limited form of Saurian. Their simplified version consists mainly of short 1 or 2 word sentences and commands. Invariably, their speech centers around warfare and its application. Their understanding of words outside this arena is simple and limited at best. The Croxagores display the lowest capability of speech of the Lizardmen. Nonetheless, they understand simple orders surprisingly well, and unlike the Saurus, they comprehend Saurian speech that does not just center around war. This is because they were created as beasts of burden, and so will dutifully understand and carry out orders involving heavy labor. Thus ends the recorded stories of the Lizardmen. Long before the rise of elves, dwarves, or men, the Lizardmen existed in the oppressive depths of the streaming jungles. Coldly alien and enigmatic, their civilization seeks to restore the order in the world that their Old One creators envisaged before their mysterious disappearance. They are a dangerous and powerful civilization, and any who enter their lands do so at their own peril.